All right, welcome back for Chapter 7, Lesson 2. We're going to be factoring by the GCF. So the objective for today is to factor polynomials by using the greatest common factor, which is the GCF, which we talked about last lesson. Okay, so we're just kind of building upon that. So first, recall that the distributive property states that A multiplied by the quantity B plus C equals AB plus AC. Now let's think about that for a second. Remember, whenever we have A, we want to distribute that to both things inside the parentheses. So A times B is just AB plus A times C is AC. Okay? So that's how we just do the distributive property, right? That's how we get AB plus AC. But the distributive property also means the reverse. So if we start with this right here, AB plus AC, this also means A multiplied by the quantity B plus C because they both have an A. They're both multiplied by an A. Do you see that right there? And so what that is that is the greatest common factor, right? So what we're doing is the distributive property allows you to factor. So instead of writing A twice, we factor it and we say A is multiplied by this whole thing, B plus C. Okay, so we're factoring out that commonality, that GCF, from both of these monomials, right? So we factor it out, we write it once, and we just say, hey, A is multiplied by B, and it's also multiplied by C, so we're just going to write it as A multiplied by the quantity B plus C, and you see there's a B plus C. Okay, so the distributive property allows you to factor out the GCF, which is that A, of the terms in a polynomial to write a factored form of the polynomial. So that's what this is. This is the factored form, and that's what we're going to be doing. Factored form in this lesson. Okay, we're going to be given things like this, and we're going to write them in the factored form. Okay, so a polynomial in its factored form, when it is a polynomial is in its factored form when it is written as a product of monomials and polynomials. So monomials and polynomials. So here's our monomial and here's our polynomial, which is a binomial. So it's a monomial multiplied by a binomial. So a polynomial is in its factored form when it is written as a product of monomials and polynomials that cannot be factored further. Okay, the polynomial 2 multiplied by the quantity 3x minus 4x is not fully factored. Can you guys tell why? It's not fully factored because it still has this x that is common inside the parentheses. Okay, so it is not fully factored because the terms in the parentheses have a common factor of x. However, if we have this, I'm going to rewrite this, 2 multiplied by the quantity 3x minus 4x, right? We notice that they still have an x in common, and we can factor out that x. And it would be 2x times 3 minus 4, and then that would be the factored form of that, is taking that commonality out. Okay, does everybody see that? All right, let's go ahead and look at a few problems. Okay, the first one is example 1A. So it says factor each polynomial and then check your answer. Okay, so we're just looking for the GCF. So if we look here, the greatest common factor, what do they have in common? Okay, so there's a 2 here, and there's a 2 within that 4. So that's the greatest common factor. So we're just going to factor that out. So how I could write this, okay, so this is basically, I can factor out that 2, but this 4, so this is like 2x squared, right? Minus, I'm going to write this 4 with a 2 in it, which would be 2 times 2. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to factor out that commonality, that GCF, that 2. Okay? So we're going to factor that out. So we write that on the outside. That's our 2 on the outside. Okay? And then what's left is this x squared minus this other 2 here. So that is our answer, okay? And it wants us to check that answer, so I'm going to write the word check. Okay, I'm gonna rewrite this, 2 multiplied by the quantity, x squared minus 2, and then we just, to check it, we do the distributive property, right? So I'm gonna multiply this, right? 2 times the quantity x squared is just 2x squared, and then 2 times a negative 2 is negative 4, and boom shakalaka, there you have it. We have the same thing, so we know that we did this correctly. Okay, do you guys see that? All right, great. Let's go ahead and look at the next problem, example 1b. So it says factor by using the GCF, factor each polynomial, then check your answer. Okay, so here we have it. Okay, what's the GCF of here? So when I have these, there's 3 terms, not a big deal. I like to look at the numbers first, and then I look at the letters, okay? So from the numbers, if I look at 8, 4, and 16, what's the biggest number that goes into all those? I'm gonna say that's 4, right? So I'm gonna rewrite this 8 as 4 times 2, and then this is just, you know, negative 4. And then this is, 16 is gonna be 4 times 4. So I'm gonna write negative 4 times 4, okay? So I just did the numbers, like 4 times 2 is 8. 4 is just 4, and 4 times 4 is 16. Now you see that I kind of left spaces, and I left that space because if we look, okay, they have a number in common, which is 4, but if you look x cubed, x squared, x, they also have a variable. They all have a variable. So now we have to figure out, okay, what is the variable they have in common? So if we think about x cubed, right, that is the same as x times x times x, right? X squared is the same thing as x times x, and just x is just x, okay? So what do they have in common? They have this 4, right? They all have a 4, and then they all have, there's 3 here too, so they all have 1x. Do you guys see that? So that's what they have in common. So 4x, 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 that's what we're factoring out. So we're gonna factor out 4x, and that's gonna be multiplied by 2x times x, which is x squared. So 2x squared minus x minus just 4. Okay, so that's our answer, but they want us to check it, so we're gonna do that. I'm gonna rewrite this. 4x multiplied by the quantity, 2x squared minus x minus 4. Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and check it. So first I'm gonna go, sorry about that, 4x times 2x squared. 4 times, I always like to do the numbers and the variables. 4 times 2 is 8. X times x squared is x cubed. And then we're gonna go 4x times a negative x. So 4 times a negative is gonna be negative 4. X times x is x squared. And then lastly, 4x times that negative 4. Remember, you have to distribute it to each thing in this trinomial. 4 times 4 is 16. It's a negative 16x. And if we look at it, we got, what do we have? 8x cubed minus 4x squared minus 16x. Woohoo! It's the same thing. We did it right. Perfect. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay, 1C. How are you guys doing? Are you guys getting this? Ooh, what's different about 1C? Okay, so we're gonna look here. We're gonna try to see what's in common. So the first thing I see in common, this is a little tricky, is there's a negative, right? So when there's a negative here and a negative here, we're gonna go ahead and factor out that negative, okay? So I see the negative. What else do we see? Let's look at look at the signs, the numbers, and then the letters. So, okay, negative, we're gonna be factoring that out. What about numbers? What is common between 14 and 12? What's the biggest thing that goes into both of those? I'm gonna say 2. 2 goes into 14 and 2 goes into 12, and that's the biggest number. And then what about the x's? What's the biggest number that goes into x and x squared? I'm gonna say it's x, right? So I'm gonna factor out that negative first. And then it's gonna be a 2, right? The number's 2. And then it's gonna be an x. And then I'm just gonna go straight into it. So sometimes how I like to do this, if I, instead of going like this way, so I was kind of like doing this and I was writing it all out just so you could see. So I hope that you kind of get that. I'm gonna kind of go to that was kind of like a baby step. So what I like to do is I know that this number times this number here is gonna give me that. So a negative times a what is a negative? Well, it's a negative times a positive. So I know my number here is gonna be a positive, right? Then I'm going to go, okay, 2 times what is 14? And I know that 2 times 7 is 14. And then x times what is x? Well, x times 1 is x. So I don't write any x. I just leave it, okay? Now we're going to go to the next thing. So a negative times what is a negative? Well, I know a negative times a, it's got to be a positive. A negative times a positive is a negative. And then I'm going to do the number. 2 times what is 12? 2 times 6 is 12, right? 2 times 6. And then x times what is x squared? And x times x is x squared, right? So boom, there you have it. So this is our answer, and we're going to go ahead and check this, right? So I'm going to write check. I'm going to write the problem down. Uh-oh. It's okay. I have my lovely little tape here. You can erase all my problems. Well, not all of them, but at least these ones. Okay, negative 2x times 7 plus 6x. Okay, so then I'm going to use that distributive property, right? I'm going to distribute it here. Negative times a positive is a negative. 2 times 7 is 14. X times is just x. And then distribute it here. Negative times a positive is a negative. 2 times 6 is 12. X times x is x squared. So is that the same answer as the beginning? Negative 14x minus 12 squared. Woohoo! Yes, it is. Got it right. Perfect. Okay, on to this one. Example 1D. Okay, factor each polynomial. Check your answer. So here, look at the signs. There is a positive, positive, and a negative. So it's kind of all over the place. So we're not going to factor out that negative. We only factor out the negative if the negative is here and here. Okay? So we don't worry about the negative. Then we're going to look at the numbers. 3, 2, and 10. Is there any number in common there? No, I did not see anything. What about the letters? We got x cubed, x squared, and then there's nothing there. So here, this is a problem. There's really nothing in common. So this is cannot be factored. And that's it. That's the answer. Boom. There you have it. Perfect. Okay, now it is your turn to check it out. For example, 1A and 1B. And here's my friend the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device. Go ahead and work these two problems out. When you get done, press play and we'll talk about them. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, let's see how you did. So right here, we have 5b plus 9b cubed. First, I'm going to look at the numbers, 5 and 9. Anything in common? I'm going to say no. Then we look at the letters. There's a b and a b cubed. So I know that they both have a b in common. So that's what I'm going to factor out, the b. And then I'm just going to go b times what is 5b? Well, this is like 1b, right? So 1 times 5. So you know you need the 5 there. And then b times 5 is going to give you 5b. So that's it, right? And then you need a positive 9. And this is just a b, so it's just going to be plus 9. And then b times what is b cubed? And it's going to have to be b squared. B times b squared gives you that b cubed. Okay? So there is your answer, but we have to check it. So we're going to rewrite it. And then we are going to use that distributive property. So b times 5 is that 5b. And then b times positive 9b squared, we have a plus 9. B times b squared is b cubed. So is this the same thing? 5b plus 9b cubed. Okay, so if you got the answer and you checked it and all's great, awesome job. Okay, let's move on to the next. We have 9d squared minus 8 squared. Okay, so first I'm going to look at the signs. They're both not negative. I mean, we got a positive and a negative, so we don't do anything there. I'm going to look at the numbers. There's a 9, excuse me, and an 8 squared. Factors of 9 are just 1, 9, and 3, and none of those are factors of 8, especially not 8 squared. So there's nothing with the numbers. What about the letters? Well, there's a d squared, but there's no d there. So this is one, there's nothing that's common, so this cannot be factored. So that's the answer for this one. So if you got that one right, great job. Okay, now on to 1C and 1D. So I want you to try these on your own. Here's my friend the pause dragon. Remind you to pause your device, work out 1C and 1D. When you get done, press play and we'll go over them together. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, let's see how you did on 1C. Okay, so for this one, what I noticed right off the bat is there's a negative, right, on both. So I know that I'm going to be factoring out that negative. I'm looking at the numbers now, 18 and 7. 7 is prime. The only factors are 1 and 7, and those are not factors of 18. So they don't have a common factor with the numbers. What about the letters? We got y cubed and y squared. So I would say the amount of y's that they have in common would be y squared. So that's what I'm going to factor out. Okay, a negative times what is a negative, and it's going to have to be positive, and there is no number, so I just rewrite that 18. And then y squared times what is y cubed? Well, y squared times y, right, is y cubed. Then we move here, so I have to go negative times what is a negative, and it's a negative times a positive. And we know that, right? If this was a negative, then a negative times a negative would be a positive, and so that wouldn't be right. So this has to be positive, because a negative times a positive is the only way you get a negative. Okay, so there's no number, so I just rewrite that 7. And then y squared times what is y squared? And it's just y squared times 1. We don't write the 1, we just leave it. So that is our answer. So if you got that one right, great job. But remember, you had to check it. So we're going to write the word check. We're going to rewrite this. Negative y squared multiplied by the quantity, 18y plus 7. And then we're going to go ahead and do that distributive property twice. So a negative times a positive is a negative. Y, and then there's a number, right? 18. Y squared times y is y cubed. And then we distribute here. Negative times a positive is a negative. We write the number and then just y squared. And then we want to see, is this the same? Negative 18y cubed minus 7y squared. Yep, it is. Perfect. Okay, on to this one. We have this lovely trinomial that we're going to factor. So first, we are going to look, okay, what are the signs? Positive, positive, negative. Okay, so since they're sporadic signs, we're not going to factor out a negative. It's only if it's a negative and a negative, right? So then let's look at the numbers. We have 8, 4, and 2. Okay, what's the common number for that? I would say 2. 2 goes into 8, 2 goes into 4, 2 goes into 2. So we're going to factor out a 2. And then we're going to look at the the variables. There's a variable, there's a variable, there's a variable. So what's the biggest amount of variables in each one? So we have x to the 4th, x cubed, and x squared. So I'd say the biggest is that x squared. This has an x squared that they all have in common, right? They have to have in common. So it can't be x to the 4th because this doesn't have x to the 4th. This only has x to the 3rd. This only has x squared. So it's the most amount of x's that they all have in common. So there's an x squared, there's an x squared there, and there's an x squared. So that's the biggest. So we're going to factor out an x squared. What we're left with is we're going to go 2 times what is 8. It's going to be 4. 2 times 4 is 8, right? And then x squared times what is x to the 4th, and we know that's x squared. And then we're going to go here, so 2 times what is a positive 4. We know it's going to be a positive 2, right? 2 times 2 is 4. And then x squared times what is x cubed, and it's going to be x. And then we have 2 times what is a negative 2, right? So 2 times, it's going to have a positive, this is going to have to be a negative. It's going to have to be a positive times a negative to get a negative. And then 2 times, it would be 1, right? 2 times 1 is 2. And then x squared times 1 is x squared. So there we have it. There is our answer. And we're going to go ahead and check that right over here. So write the word check. 2x squared multiplied by the quantity, 4x squared plus 2x minus 1. Then we're going to use that distributive property, right? 2 times 4 is 8. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th. And then we go here. 2 times 2 is 4. It's a positive 4. X squared times x is x cubed. And then we got a positive times a negative, so it's going to be negative. And then 2x squared times 1 is just 2x squared. So is this the same? Got 8x squared plus 4x cubed minus 2x squared. It is. So if you got all those right, you did a wonderful job, and I'll see you in a little bit for example 2.